again, hi everyone. My pleasure to be here with you this morning. I mean, that's the morning for us here in Europe, quite early, but it's a pleasure to be to join and be present. Let me put the panel with the people here, so I'm sure that everyone is okay. And event, give me 1 second, maybe also to open the chat just in case there is some reaction. Where is the chat? Converse. It's here, so in case that there is some reaction, I can see also the chat on my screen. Okay, well, so I've been asked to prepare a presentation, and that's the first slide. Sorry, I've been asked by Bishwana. Thanks again for having me in the workshop to prepare some kind of a presentation about ontology repositories and ontology-based services, which is kind of my subject of research for a few years. That's not really a presentation, it's more some kind of a tutorial. I call it a tutorial because I usually give that presentation. I give it like 3 or 4 times over the last couple of years. And it's a presentation that I give with some exercise in the middle, so some moment where we can stop and then have the participant in the audience participate in the exercise and things like that. So I'm not sure we will have the timing for all of that today. I'm actually very sure that we will not. So there is again. So please, I will present the beginning and then I will let you finish as exercise. I mean, you will have the support if you want to go further in terms of discovering ontology repositories and ontology-based services. This is really made as a tutorial that you can use for learning more about how to use our platforms. And so the ones of you who can get the slides after that can easily play and get and work on their side on these after. So just okay, to concretely start, I wanted to, before presenting so after presenting the tutorial, as I said, just wanted to say a word about myself, so you know we have who's presenting, but I've been introduced. Thanks, I really appreciate that. But I'm an associate researcher at INRAE and professor at the University of Montpellier. And so I've been working on semantic technologies for about years. I just want a little disclaimer in this presentation because I mean we need to kind of recall that even if we are kind of demonstrating production software and things on which we can play and practice exercise and things like that, I mean there is a bunch of bugs, there are availability issues. I might not have the answers to everything on the technical aspect also. So it's a little disclaimer. And I wanted also to acknowledge kind of the support for that because, of course, this tutorial was made in the context of several projects and that allow us to present and talk about semantic technology and the use of ontology repositories, especially the one project that I'm the principal investigator on it, called Data to Knowledge in Agronomy and Biodiversity, that's called D2CAT. Okay, so let's go through the objective of the tutorial. So please, if you have a remark or something, so I don't know what was the protocol during the rest of the meeting, but feel free to put something in the chat. If this is quite like 1 line or 2 lines of question, I can read it. If this is like a paragraph, we will have to wait the question session for that. If this is like a mandatory question you feel you have to ask, maybe feel free to interrupt or ask. Otherwise, I will go through the slides. Bishwana, just a quick remark. I've made the slide available in PDF. I send the link to you, so in case you want to share them with support that you have with the students and with the participant in the workshop, then feel free to do that. Okay, so the tutorial objectives are kind of discover what we can do with with ontology repositories using a technology that I'm going to present called OntoPortal and the specific instance of that technology. describe our ontology using standard vocabularies. That's the goal of the, the goal, the objective will allows you to be able to describe an ontology with standard vocabularies, interconnect your ontology to the rest of the world. So you will be interested in the notion of alignment. Annotate text with ontologies. Those are software those are tools in the platform that you can use, and also manipulate APIs and REST and Sparkle APIs to automate tasks when using ontologies. So the plan, so those are our objectives. I mean, the objective in terms of learning. And the plan that we're going to follow is kind of a general introduction to ontology repositories, why, what, how, what they are, what have they been defined, what are they important, things like that. I will then illustrate and talk about ontology selection and illustrates with exercise and questions and aspect with our portals. The question of ontology selection, metadata, using the recommender, which is a tool in the portal. Then we'll go through the part of the tutorial which allows you to eventually, as an ontology provider, to drop and use an ontology inside the repository. We will then illustrate the semantic annotation of text using ontologies, which is one feature of the OntoPortal technology, and work a little bit on ontology alignments. At least I wanted to show what kind of things are included in the platform for dealing with ontology mapping, ontology alignment, and then we'll finish with the process of automatized access with the APIs. So people want to use Ontology Repository not because they want to browse the web application, but because they want to automate some tasks. And we can do that with using the REST API or the Sparkle endpoint. So we might not go through the whole plan together today, but for sure this is we will have a general introduction and the rest of the slides and the content will be available. Can you, Bishwana, maybe remind me the timing and just wanted to double check. It's 5 to 7 here. And we have what, half an hour now?
Yeah, so up to 7:30 on your time, CET.
Okay.
Up to 7:30 you can speak.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, that's what I'm, 40 minutes total. Yeah, that's what I had in mind. Thanks for reminding. Okay, so I mean, let's go through general introduction. So this is going to be like the lecture part of the tutorial. And I have removed, usually, I mean, I have like 10, 12 slides on general introduction to the semantic web and ontology and things like that. At that time in the workshop, I would assume you have heard pretty well about the notion of ontology, or let's say, in a general sense, semantic resources, vocabularies, semantic vocabularies, terminologies, theories. We'll call them ontologies here in the context of the presentation, not because all of them are ontologies, but that's the name we will use as a overarching term. And I will directly focus to the notion of why we need ontology repositories in the presentation. So you may have covered already the importance of ontologies for science. The notion of representing canonical software, canonical knowledge, annotate experimental data, describe data, facilitate the building of knowledge-based application. All of that is probably things you already a little bit discussed, but I just wanted to re-put that on the table. But some of you may also know about maybe the one use case that I use sometimes to represent the success story a little bit in ontology research, called the Gene Ontology Project, which really was made as an ontology to describe gene and gene products and processes in which the genes are involved. And it has really become a success story in terms of data integration, building knowledge-based application, because it has been adopted by a very large numbers of database, it becomes the reference ontology. And so people now in the biology domain know that they can describe their genes and products with the same support. So what is interesting also with ontologies is Dallas' point is that they are spread out over the web in different formats of different size with different structures. And this is the aspect of ontologies taken as a data that's going to be interesting for us. So you will be developing an ontology, another group will be developing another one. You will be using SCOS, another group will be using OWL. You'll be developing a small model, another group.
But 49 is other than.
So you want to. Sonia. Yep, it's okay. Sonia is being mute. Sorry about that, Sonia. No, Sonika, sorry. So other issues with ontologies are that they are exploding in terms of numbers. There is a huge numbers of ontologies being uploaded in repositories, like Bioportal has been increasing over the last years. I mentioned that variety of languages to explain different level of semantics. So we usually talk about ontologies. If you use OWL, we'll talk about terminologies or vocabularies depending on the representation language that will be used and what you want to represent. But dealing with those different language and different layers makes something a little bit more complex. And then of course you have the problem of overlapping ontologies. So in the biomedical domain, for example, you will have mesh that was done to describe and index research papers by the National Library of Medicine in the US that will also overlap with some gene ontology terms, or SNOMED-CD, which is used in the clinical domain. So we have to deal with those issues when we take ontologies as data and want to make them available and share them. We always have to deal with the fact that several ontologies are being published, they are overlapping, they are in different formats, etc. So in the literature, we'll find the notion of ontology libraries, registries, repositories. Sometimes people use also the terms of terminology service. Or, well, I will go back to the definition that we're defining in the literature, and at least try to present two of them. I mean, what I think are important. The notion of ontology library will have been originally defined as a library system that offer various functions for managing, adapting, and standardizing group of ontologies. And with the vision that it's going to be important to reuse them, the support for reusing ontologies. That was a definition from 2001 from Ding and Fensel. That notion, so by ontology libraries, we will kind of identify every listing, every platform that will offer you the possibility of to list the ontologies and their metadata. And but the kind of the level of the service that the library with offer are stop here. They don't deal with the content of ontologies. And so if you go, I don't know, on a website, or the Foundry, for example, is one of the most famous library of ontology where ontologies are listed and you have their endpoints and you know where you can find them, but the content itself of ontologies is not indexed. And then a few years after that, the notion of ontology repositories become more identified as a tool in itself and becomes a subject of study. So Altman, Gomez, and Perez and Palma define ontology repositories as a structured collection of ontologies, which is kind of similar to the notion of ontology library, structured by using an ontology metadata vocabulary, some kind of common vocabulary for describing them. And then reference relations between ontologies and their modules build the semantic model of an ontology repository. So the notion of reference, cross-reference between these ontologies appears, and then the access to resources relies through semantically enabled interface applicable for humans and machine. Here you have the notion of now you access the content of ontologies and you do something with them. You have the notion of interface services to do something with the content of an ontology. This is what we call an ontology repository. And so it has really become a subject of study by the end of the 2010s. There've been a workshop, a series of workshops called ORS. There have been an important review called Where to Publish and Find Ontologies in 2012. And then that subject evolved. Bioportal becomes an important actor of that. We'll describe that. But then new ontology repositories addressing different aspects were still released over the years. In 2015, Aber was a ontology repository in the biomedical domain that was released with like addressing the question of reasoning and dealing with ontology reasoning inside the system itself. Then tools like the Ontology Lookup Service were released also in 2016, I believe. We released AgroPortal that I will talk about in the tutorial also much. But so it becomes really, with the increasing numbers of ontologies, ontology repositories became really a subject of importance. And why can we say that they are important in itself? Because they will help people when they have several questions. So if you build an ontology, how do you let the world know? So that's the first role of an ontology repository. Make the people know, make people around the world know that you've been built that. So if you need an ontology in the other direction, where do you get it? Or do you find an ontology for a specific ontology for a community or something like that? Or you know whether an ontology is any good? That's also a very important aspect. Is there some criteria for quality for an ontology to be identified as a good one, being reused, being certified by some organism, things like that? How do you find data resources that are relevant to the domain of the ontology? So, I mean, the notion of ontologies are, we develop ontologies to connect them to data. So at some point, the ontology repository can also become a place that helps you identify and find where are ontologies, where are the data that are linked to ontologies. Or could you leverage your ontology to enable new science without managing them? That's the key idea of ontology repositories, making the access to ontologies like easy access to ontologies without having to invest in the development of them, in the management of them. That was the key idea. Another way of presenting that for me over the last years, the notion of FAIR principle appears. They have been mentioned by Bishwana in the last talk, but I guess they will be also described. I'm not going to get into myself much into the FAIR principle, but I just want to point out that in the FAIR principle, the notion of vocabularies is primordial, is very important. Sorry. And that's the I2 principle that says that data should be described with standard vocabularies. And this I2 principle requires that those vocabularies and ontologies that describe the data are themselves fair. And so my point is that ontology repositories, like data repositories, help data to be fair. Ontology repositories help to make fair ontologies. They become findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And the little image that I'm using here to illustrate the slide are taken from an ontology repository that I'm going to present today called AgroPortal, which helps you to find the resources, find the semantic resources and the ontologies, access them because they are automatically indexed by the system through APIs, through Sparkle endpoint. We make them more interoperable by interconnecting portal of ontologies, interconnecting ontologies one another by describing them by connecting them with mapping, and we make them more reusable because they are more semantically described. They are accessible. They are so you know what you'll be reusing. And I'll also present that in the rest of the tutorial. So. I do here a focus on an ontology repository that has been very important and that is still very important in the domain, and that also kick off different initiatives and different other products in the area. It's called Bioportal. It's been developed by the National Center for Biomedical Ontology, which was a big NIH US NIH funded project from 2010 to 2015. Bioportal was defined as a one-stop shop for biomedical ontologies originally. The idea was really like, we need a place to find ontologies in the biomedical and biology, biomedicine domain where we need a repository for them to use them, search them, align them, things like that. So they became available, accessible, and reusable with an abstraction on the format. The biomedical domain use OBO, use UMLS, use OWL, and the abstraction on the format was really important. And then users can start publish, download, browse, search, comment, align. That was the beginning also of the Web 2, and so people were able to comment on the ontologies and things like that. And then I at some point joined the team over there and worked with annotation services and the fact of developing annotation services for these repositories. So BioPortal really became a reference platform for biomedical ontologies and semantic resource in general, with a lot of functionality. And at some point around 2013, but later that with 2015, the technology was originally open source, but became packaged in what they used to call a virtual appliance, where you can set up your own bioportal in a few days and have it in your system. And that was made originally, I would say historically, that was mostly adopted by other communities, but I mean, I will come back on that. But originally that was mostly adopted by, let's say, hospitals and systems who wants to develop their own or annotate their own data, but could not do that because biomedical data will be often restricted and they cannot do that. This is a web application, everything was going online. And so hospital will need to annotate, to annotate clinical data, for example, locally, will have to install the bioportal locally. So the virtual appliance start taking off like that. And we'll come back to that a little after. And so this is quite an old slide. There is way more than 500 or 600 ontologies now in BioPortal. We have more than 1,000 ontologies there. Not all of them anymore are in the biomedical domain. The platform has become more flexible in terms of the topic that they accept. So in one slide, BioPortal is kind of an application that can offer different kind of services, like basically ontology services, when you can search, traverse, comment, download ontologies. Ontologies are really the first class object in the repository. You have those mapping services where you can create mappings, upload mappings that are already existing. Some mappings, some lexical mappings will be identified by the systems. You can also download those mappings as bulk mapping and work with them locally. Those mappings are also a very important component of the platform. You have those UI widgets that have been also developed that helps you to kind of connect your system to the bioportal systems, where you can, for example, start typing or in a little auto-completion form the name of a disease, and then the string will be automatically transformed by the little pop-up by the little widget in a URI identifying the concept in an ontology, which makes your data being encoded from scratch. Then you have the annotation software, this called the Ncbi annotator, where you will give some text, you will give some keywords, you will give some abstracts and text definitions, and you will identify the ontology terms that are mentioned in this text. And from this annotation workflow, we used to develop also something called the Ncbi resource index, which will give you access to a bunch of data that will be already indexed and processed by the platform. This aspect of BioPortal has been discontinued last year or 2 years ago because it was like too hard work to maintain. Data was going too fast. The technologies that we used for that years ago were not appropriate. So you don't have that functionality on BioPortal anymore. But that was also originally part of the idea. And all of that was accessible via an API. So you could do that automatically using software agent, and also using a UI, using a web application. So at that point in the tutorial, I would assume you may already have seen that picture illustrating the link Open Data Cloud. I mean, so you may have seen probably that cloud up in the here and maybe this one too. This one is the version of 2015, I think, or the end of maybe 2016. And now the shape of the link Open Data Cloud. So I mean, I will assume you've been presented to that. I mean, the notion of link, open data, RDF dataset being presented, being interconnected, and that diagram being an illustration of that web of data being built out of RDF data being published online. So in 2016, it took a few years to the Link Open Data Cloud people and us to release that, to integrate the bioportal data. But one day we start having that kind of cancer shaped I mean, this kind of blob in the side that was like red like that, and all of that, or most of it, was the bioportal data. So I'm kind of illustrating this slide here to show that the bioportal project at some point had a huge impact on that work of domain of research of link open data, because they made ontologies available in one unique place, and that becomes, when it becomes finally visible in the link open data cloud, and it becomes a real revolution in that visualization. So in that general introduction, I also wanted to kind of list what are those ontology repositories and ontology libraries that I have defined previously. I mentioned, of course, the Ncbi bioportal, and I put it in the top of the list of ontology repositories, and sometimes the term portal is also used. But you can also mention things like Ncbi, World, the EBI ontology lookup service. Those are very important ontology repositories that were developed originally. But you also have things like the LOV portal. We've been developing AgroPortal, but there are other ontology repositories in the biomedical domain, or independent of the domain, like Onto servers. Some of those initiatives are being stopped, some of those are still alive, but those are names. At some point, we had also things that we used to call web indexes. So that's not an approach that is being developed too much anymore. Things like Swoogle, for example, will index online all the ontologies available online, and then build a research service for that. And you also have a bunch of ontology libraries. Web Protege, for example, offers a library like that. OboFoundry, Color, Bartok, all of that were on a set of ontology libraries. And then you have also technology for developing those services. Cosmos is one of them. LexCVS, another one. Mondeca developed his own. I mean, there's a bunch of technologies for developing terminology services, and sometimes the technology don't even have a name. And a few abandoned projects in the past. So I mean, this slide took me a long time to produce this slide. Now I have it, but doing that review took me 2 years of knowledge about ontology libraries and ontology repositories, and synthesize like that makes you think that oh, okay, all of those people are doing this, but it takes actually years and years of different projects being synthesized here. And I wanted to also emphasize in those technologies, the ones that are reusable, the one that people can actually easily reuse and deploy their own service with it. Bioportal was like that, I mentioned it, and also the ontology lookup service became like that after a little bit. Supposed to be also like that, but I haven't never seen any instance or any installation of that. And I wanted also to, in that listing, illustrates the one that have been reusing the OntoPortal technology or the bioportal technology here. And now that the site is not even up to date anymore, we are missing a few installation of the bioportal technology here. So the bioportal technology has been one of the most reused in developing other ontology repositories, and it has been originally reused by National Cancer Institute and by an initiative in the 2010 called the Open Ontology Repository Initiative, to try to standardize the open ontology repositories. The MMI used it for a while, the ESIP organization used it for a while, then those organizations developed their own systems. Then we started reusing it for AgroPortal, Stanford Library used it in another domain. LifeWatch, a partner, now uses it for developing a portal in ecology and biodiversity domain. The Chinese Academy of Medical Science is also part of the Ncbi reusers. So now we are kind of communicating on something we call the OntoPortal Alliance. So we all develop and maintain Ontology Repository in this group based on the same original technology developed for BioPortal at Stanford University. So we've been working on this on a project that I will present for French biomedical terminologies, the Chinese that I mentioned, EcoPortal with LifeWatch, and we are also building AgroPortal here. So in Montpellier, in my group, we've been developing two ontology repositories. One called the Cipher Bioportal, which was originally developed to address a need in the domain of offering a service to support terminologies in the biomedical domain that will have French content. So with French labels that will be only in French, that will have French content. And so it was kind of odd at that time to work with a BioPortal being multilingual, which is not completely the case still today. So we decided to develop our own version of like a French BioPortal. And we had some use case for that. This was a project called Cipher, and we ended up with a platform with around 40 ontologies terminologies with French content in it. And we will connect those terminologies and ontologies when available to the main Ncbi BioPortal, which will contain the content in English. And we also develop in Montpellier. There is an important community doing research in agronomy, agriculture. We have several organizations on that. So Montpellier is an appropriate ecosystem, research ecosystem for this domain of research. And so we decide with the local Montpellier community, and then after that, with several use cases in France and in Europe to kick off a project called AgroPortal, where the idea would be to develop a project dedicated for agri-food, agronomy, originally biodiversity research also, but now we were pushing to another partner, but these kind of things. And we have 5 driving use cases originally. Now we have around 250 registered users on the platform, 135 ontologies or semantic resources. We have identified already 80 other candidates or that we could consider putting in the systems. So this has been a successful project, and people, because there are definitively users in the agri-food domains developing and interested in Ontology Repositories. So this is a few words about the semantic indexing of French biomedical resource project, where our vision was really to develop the project in which we developed the Cipher BioPortal. The idea was, and I insist on this, the fact that there was no tool in French to annotate clinical or medical, biomedical information that would be written in French. So if you give me French text data, there will not be publicly available tools and services to annotate and find ontology terms in this text. And this exists in English in the BioPortal. And so the idea of building the French BioPortal was kind of driven by the idea that we wanted to build such an annotator. And I will illustrate that right after. So I've presented the BioPortal, the numbers of ontologies now is not completely updated here, but we have, for example, in this portal, the French version of the mesh that is developed by a French organization, French research organization in the health domain called Inserum. And they develop and translate every year the American version of mesh. So our vision was to develop this service that I will illustrate that will be illustrated later in the rest of the tutorial. The annotator service is a service that you find in BioPortal or in the French Cipher BioPortal, where you will give a little bit of text and will identify in the text. Here you see a little sentence in French saying le mélanome. The melanoma is a skin cancer, etc. Probably a definition taken from the French Wikipedia. The annotator will help us to find in the text which are the annotations, which are the texts that are mentioned, which are the concepts in ontologies that are mentioned. And you can select the ontologies you want to use as target. You can also activate different aspects of the service, include the hierarchy or not include the hierarchy. So if include the mappings between ontologies, and so use those semantic service layers that that the platform and the ontologies brings to you when you do annotation. So for example, you can annotate your text mentioning melanoma with the notion of cancer or with the notion of disease, even if the notion of disease, if the text does not mention the sentence disease, because you know from your ontologies that a melanoma is a cancer, that a cancer is a disease, and then you can use those annotation afterwards to query, to semantically query your data. The AgroPortal project on this side was a project to develop an ontology and vocabulary vocabulary and ontology repository for agronomy. The key idea was to be able to develop and support a reference ontology for this domain. We wanted to re-implement the wheel, reuse the maximum what been done in the other domain. The BioPortal project was already very successful when we when we built AgroPortal. And we wanted to focus on new aspects in terms of computer semantic web research, but also like offer that community something already mature, something that will facilitate and enable new science in the agri-food domain. So we decided to build AgroPortal that I've also quickly presented, but now in AgroPortal you can publish, you can browse, you can peer review semantic resource and ontologies. You have versions from them. I'm going to illustrate some of these, but because we'll not have all the time to go over the complete tutorial, I want to insist on those introductory slides also here. So the portal will show you the numbers of visits for those ontologies, a few numbers. You can search for them. You can. We also have a service that helps you identify the ones that are appropriate for the ontologies that are appropriate for your data, called the recommender. Things like that. Originally, this project was driven by different use cases. I'm not going to insist on them, but pushing for the development of a specific agronomy developed ontology repositories. And we have, for example, in AgroPortal, important ontologies or thesaurus that have been that we develop that will, for example, capture phenotypes and traits, or that will capture transformation for food. We have also reference thesaurus, like for example the AgroVark or the Anae thesaurus that are developed by reference organization to index their data. Over the last 5 years, we've seen in AgroPortal an evolution in the numbers of ontologies and in the numbers of users and the project being referenced in the platform. Well, to end that general introduction on ontology repositories, I just wanted to mention the research we are doing on these topics, and I did on the exercise 2 years ago to review the challenges for ontology repositories and ontology-based services, and I put them in a manuscript called the research habilitation that we are doing. It's some kind of a thesis and I put them here and synthesize all the work we've done on 6 challenges that I briefly described here, and I'm not gonna get into the detail of the research we are doing, but just to show you the challenges that are when you work with ontologies repositories. So you have the aspect of working with the evaluation and the selection of these ontologies, which how to select the ones that are appropriate for your data. And for this, you rely a lot on the notion of metadata. You have the challenge of ontology of multilingualism, the fact that the service need to be multilingual, but we're not talking about only the platform being in different languages. We're talking about the platform being able to deal with the content of ontologies that could be multilingual. And I say cool because it's quite exceptional that an ontology or a resource is half% in English, half% in French, half% in 100%. Still the morning here in France, 100% in French, 100% in English. What happened is sometimes it's very mixed, and it's very hard for ontology repositories to handle that multilingual aspect. There is a huge challenge also, of course, in the notion of ontology alignment. The fact of putting ontologies together brings you the notion of aligning them and putting them together, and connecting them is maintaining those connections, offering those connections as a data in itself is also a huge amount of work for ontology repositories. You have the notion of ontology-based services and the fact of building those generic services. So I said that ontologies are dispatching everywhere. They are in different formats, they're in different forms, different shapes, different size. And independently of that, we want to provide generic services for them, generic ways of using them. And that creates a real challenge in building ontology-based services. You have the notion of annotation and linked data. That is, if we are building ontology repositories, if we are building ontologies, it's to use them to annotate data, to describe data. And so the notion of annotation is always linked to the notion of ontology repositories. And this is also a challenge. And of course, you have the challenge of interoperability and scalability. As much ontologies you build, as much your ontology repository needs to become scalable, and as much ontology repositories and ontologies you build, as much you want them to become interoperable at the ontology repository level and at the ontology level. So those are challenges that we are working on an everyday practice in the context of the project we are developing and that I'm presenting in the tutorial. So this is the end of the introductory section, and I'm going to present a little bit the tutorial material. So you be sure that in the last 10-13 minutes we have everything on hands to kind of continue with that mode. And as I explained, you will be able to practice some of the demo. So what I usually do also when I present these tutorials, I'm doing it with some demos in the middle, which are a little bit more hard, some demos and exercise in the middle, which are a little bit more hard also to do online. But this is something that is kind of doable also with the tutorial. So the first material we will need, or you will also need to participate into that tutorial, are the following. So you're going to need to pick up one of the ontology repository of your choice. Sorry, I changed position here in the. So I will recommend you to select one of the ontology repository that will be relevant for your domain of interest, let's say. So, and I use 3 of them here down in the Ontoportal family. And because this is the tutorial is kind of directly connected to the Ontoportal family. Not saying that doing things in other ontology repositories will not be equivalent. I mean, you will have the same notion in, for example, on EBI, but the slides that I'm going to present and the exercise and the demo will not be done with this platform. But everything that I will illustrate on AgroPortal, the tutorial will use AgroPortal. You can do it on EcoPortal or on BioPortal, except a couple of functions that I will mention when we go through them. It's especially related to ontology metadata description, because we've done some specific work in AgroPortal for that. So if you're specifically interested in being able to describe your ontologies with rich metadata, then I will recommend to use AgroPortal. So you have the following URLs. Most of the time, you just go to Google and type the names of the portal, you get there. So what you will need also for the tutorial will be basically a web browser to use the web application and kind of illustrates and understand what's going on there. And toward the ends of the tutorial, you might need to use a little REST client, something like a DHC or curl, something that helps you to fire HTTP requests. So when you use your browser, you automatically fire get HTTP requests. The client will help you to fire other kind of requests like post, put, patch requests, things like that. So if you will upload an ontology and you want to change the metadata or you want to do something with it, you can use the REST API. I will illustrate that. You might need a little text editor to edit your queries and eventually your ontologies or things like that, and eventually and possibly also an ontology. So if you've been developing an ontology in OWL or SCOS, then you could, or terminology in SCOS, then you could also use it in the context of the tutorial. And during the tutorial, when you'll see those little sign, then it means the first one will mean that there is a demo that goes with it. So usually here I'm using a demo to illustrate what I'm talking about. Maybe I do it a couple of times here. And when you see that little practice tag things, it means that there's typically an exercise that you can do on your own here. And if I do the tutorial over 1 day time, and then we take some time to go through the exercise and practice the exercise together. Still, again, in terms of resources, I will don't give the examples with AgroPortal myself, but equivalent queries can be done on the other portals. And those are the URL to query the API of those portals. So if you go to data.agroportal.liam.fr, you will get an access to our API. And at the end, those are at the end of the tutorial, those are the URL we will use. There is a little documentation online that I mentioned here. On the AgroPortal documentation wiki, we have a little documentation for people who want to go a little further and discover that. But the basic documentation is this tutorial itself, which shows and explains how to do a few things. Some of you want to go through the exercise of using the API and also uploading maybe an ontology to do a test. Then you will need to create an account on the platform, and you will get an API key when you create that account. By creating this account, you will be able to upload an ontology or vocabulary yourself, and then use the API key that is provided. When you use the API, you will get that a little later. So I just wanted to mention that if during the tutorial we end up uploading a few resources just for the goal of the exercise, then I might not keep them in the portal after that, because I mean, the portal also needs to maintain and curate the content of the things here. So in case you use it in the context of the tutorial, then let me know, and we can erase the content after the tutorial, so from the platform. And I mentioned that for those who want to go a little closer, all of that is based on open source technology. All the codes that have been used to develop BioPortal is originally open source and shared on GitHub. AgroPortal, we use that code, modify it, and put it available back on GitHub also. And that's going to be the same with LifeWatch, with EcoPortal. Okay, is there any remark, any question at that time before we move on to the beginning of the concrete? So now I'm going to take the 5 last minutes to show you the way the ontology the tutorial works, and helps you understand how to play with it a little bit on your side in the context of one of the hands-on sessions or something like that. So as I may, remember the topic. So the first one is ontology selection. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to deal with that. Show the ontology selections, and then maybe I will try to go a little bit through the content to show you a little bit what we can do with the platform and illustrating with the platform. So this section will help you use the metadata and search within an ontology, use the recommender in the platform, and define metadata for your ontology. So of course, the process of selecting an ontology is it's not trivial. I mean, a lot of users don't know what are their requirements, what they need. There is a numbers of variety of ontologies and different platforms to find them. They encode different level of complexity, different levels of semantics, from terminologies, thesaurite, taxonomy to ontologies that are semantically more rich. We would like maybe sometime to automate the process of selecting an ontologies for a tool or an agent to be able to identify which ontology to use, like on the fly. And if an ontology is not available, maybe pick up another one. And there are different diversity of user requirements for that and expectation. We want to pick up an ontology for a knowledge-based system. We want to pick up an ontology and then extend that ontology to provide an extension or encode a new domain that has not been encoded in ontologies yet, but then connect that to something that was already done. Then automatically substitute an ontology to another one, things like that. And what is the risk of a bad choice? I mean, when you select an ontology, you will miss a relevant ontology in your work. So first, you miss something that could be relevant for you. You miss the connection or integration that will be doable with connecting to the right ontologies. The idea of facilitating data integration, or if a huge amount of database are relying on ontologies that you don't use, then you might just have your data on your own being disconnected from the rest of the world. And you might possibly start an ontology on your own and then develop an expertise, or use your expertise to develop an ontology on your own, whereas a community has already done these kind of things, and maybe you can join and participate in the scientific debate and activities around that. So those are the challenge of selecting an ontology. So in BioPortal, AgroPortal, the platform allows you to browse ontology repositories and have that faceted search approach where you can develop them and search them. And so I'll invite you to go online to discover that aspect. You can search for ontology terms. So if you fire a query, for example, for plant hate, then you will find results in 43 ontologies, and sometimes several results in that ontology. Those are keyword search. So you'll identify the keywords that will be identified somewhere in the ontology, in the properties or in the name of the term. And in AgroPortal also we use ontology groups and categories.
Sorry for interrupting, sir, but we are short in time, so you have 5 more minutes to conclude.
I'm kind of illustrating a little bit the way I can progress, or the way here we can do with the tutorial here, and then I will finish as I said. So so we organize in the portal ontologies with groups and categories that helps you to identify also ontologies, for example, on plant, on food and human nutrition. They are classified into groups and categories like that. And you have this process of selecting ontologies using filters and faceted search on your side. So this is typically the kind of things I will do as a demo in the tutorial, and then I will give you your turn here, spend a few times on the tutorial and do things like that. So the rest of the tutorial will be based on that process of demos and exercise. Here you have steps where you can browse and do some work describing ontologies with metadata. And then we illustrate the output inside the portal in terms of what is the metadata offering you in terms of selecting and describing ontologies. A little later, we work with the impact of that metadata when you search ontologies online, things like that, and with a series of exercises here that you can do. Another part of the ontology of the tutorial shows you how to drop and use an ontology inside the portal. So that's something, also an exercise that you can do if you will be able to share and start using an API and services inside the platform for your ontology, even if your ontology is not related to one of the domain of the portal that I've mentioned. That's the goal of this part of the tutorial. And then the tutorial goes over a service called the annotator service. So a service that I have quickly presented before, where you will give some text data and then annotate this text data using ontology, the annotator, identify, see how to use the API for that, and then get back to the ontologies to do that. So that's part of the tutorial, part of the annotator example of the tutorial. And then we will illustrate a little bit the notion of ontology alignment later in the tutorial, and I'm just showing you a few slides and I'm finishing the presentation here. The notion of being able to build those links between ontologies in order to facilitate data integration, and the way we represent mappings inside the ontology repositories. And finally, we will illustrate in the tutorial a little later how you can use the portal, or you can use the APIs to automate the task you want to do with your ontology. So if you upload an ontology, and then by the end of the tutorial, you can use it directly using the API or the Sparkle endpoint inside the things. There are a few queries that are illustrated inside the tutorial show you, for example, how to query these and these aspects to get ontologies, and how you get for example, for a given queries, or you get the UI version and the API version of it. And we finished the tutorial by a few examples of Sparkle queries that you can also fire on the Sparkle endpoint to understand a little bit more Sparkle and the way we deal with ontology. So this is a 5-minute quick definition or presentation of the content of you will find in the tutorial. The slides are available here, and I've slightly modified them for the tutorial there, but you will also find them on SlideShare. If you Google Clement Jonquet SlideShare tutorial, you find the very first version that I put 2 years ago online. And please go ahead, practice these on your side if you want to discover a little bit more about ontology repositories. And I've made myself available offline also over the rest of the week to answer a question if there are any, even after the rest of the week, of course. My email is actually available here. Otherwise, it makes no sense to say that I'm available. So I hope you got a quick introduction of that notion of what you can do with ontology repositories, or you can use them through ontology repositories. It's kind of important also to understand that if we put build them, it's to use them in specific context. I hope you understand a little bit about the support that I've written for you to discover a little bit about those aspects, and I would advise you to go in more details about that if you want. Yep,
Thank you.